Good morning, guys. Thank you so much for having me. I cannot tell you how weird this is. I genuinely was sat in this room 10 years ago, so this is very strange, especially for my mum as well, who's also with me. So thank you again for having me. So thank you for the introduction. A little bit about me. So I started GSAL in 2008 when the schools merged. I then left with A-levels in economics, business and maths, went on to study at Newcastle University, economics and management, graduated in 2017, everything was going quite smoothly, got offered a really good graduate job at a company called Lowell in Leeds, which was basically in audit and accountancy. And I kind of went into that because it was the thing to be done at the time, especially the people that I was on my course with at university. A lot of my school friends had also gone off to go do amazing graduate jobs in London, as well as up north as well. But I think I kind of went down that route because I felt I had to, which I'll kind of come back to towards the end of my presentation. So it was all going really smoothly, got this amazing graduate job, and my mum and my dad were really proud of me, and it kind of all seemed amazing from the outside. I'd been offered this amazing salary as well, which when you're 21, by the way, and you get offered an amazing salary, there's often a reason, and the reason for this was it was hard work. So I'd lasted about, I think, 3 months in, and I just wasn't enjoying what I was doing. And I think I kept it quiet for a little bit. I don't know how open I was about how much I wasn't enjoying my job. And it's for some people, but I realised it wasn't for me. I wanted to be out there speaking to people, selling things. So I decided to hand my notice in. I think a lot of people thought, what is she doing? She's just got this amazing degree, she's been offered this amazing job, and she's packing it all in. And at the time, I did feel a little bit ashamed. I think I was quite embarrassed to tell people that I was leaving this job, but I had to do it because I was so unhappy. So that's kind of my background. And then this is what I'm doing today. So this is skipping a little bit to a few years later, and I'll fill in the gaps in just a second. But what I do today, I am the founding owner of a boutique fitness studio, which is called North Studio. I think there's quite a few of your parents are actual clients of mine. They all told me some of you are in here today, so all my lovely clients. So we've got 2 studios now. Round Day is coming up to 4 years old in August, and Harrogate has just turned 1. So I opened my second site last year. For the last financial year, so that's 1st of April last year to 31st of March this year. I appreciate we're not 31st of March yet, but we're turning over around £300,000. And as it's also been said, I am a current candidate on The Apprentice trying to pitch for some investment to expand my business. So a little bit about North Studio, if some of you haven't been told by your parents what it's like. So it's essentially small group fitness. So it's a lot different to, your Pure Gyms, your David Lloyds. It's really small groups. You're paying less than you would for a personal trainer, but you're paying a little bit more than you would for Pure Gym, if that makes sense. So you're paying anywhere between £10 and £15 to come along and get a small group session, and it's a really inclusive, small community gym, and we offer all sorts of different things. We do Pilates, we do spinning, yoga, we do more HIIT, boxing, and we've also started to introduce some kind of workshops as well. So with it being International Women's Day, I think it was week before last, we did all sorts of things around careers, and we did health, everything. So it's almost like a bit of an all-in-one boutique hub, which has developed over time. And what you see right now is definitely not what it looked like 4 years ago, by the way. It's taken a long time to kind of get to this bit. I appreciate you probably can't read that, but it's basically saying we've got over 100 classes each week, and we offer loads of different kinds of classes, and there's a little bit of something for everyone. We've got everything from people as young as, I think we've got a few GSAL clients actually, students that come to the studio, as well as much older clients. So we have something that's truly for everything, and it's taken a long time to kind of get to this finessed stage. There's been a lot of ups and downs, which there is in business, which again, I'll get to. So here's some pictures as well that I put up yesterday. So we've got Reformer Pilates. The one on the bottom left corner is the Leeds studio in Round Day, which some of you may have driven past, and I think the majority of your guys' parents are the ones that go to that one. And then Harrogate's on the right, and then there's just a few different pictures. There's Lily there in that top right corner, who's actually an ex-GSAL student on the treadmill there. So that's all nice and pretty, but it wasn't for quite a long time. So getting there, I'll just skip back to quitting my accountancy role. So I quit my accounting role. Like I said, everyone thought I was crazy, but I knew it wasn't for me. And I was always interested in fitness. I'd had quite a big role in sport at school. I'd played netball, and I was really big into my horse riding back then. I used to do a lot of show jumping. I think my picture might actually still be up on the sports, somewhere near the sports, I think. But I was really into my sport, and I kind of used all that I loved to do my personal training course, my fitness instructor course, which again, I felt a little bit like, what am I doing? I've got this amazing degree, and now I'm kind of taking 10 steps back. But I went and did it anyway, and I kind of had to forget what anyone thought of me. Got on with it, and I started working in a gym in Leeds City Centre. I then started working at Sweaty Betty, which most of you may have heard of. It's a big athleisure brand, which I worked at the shop in Harrogate, and I was doing classes for them, working at Rudding Park. I was kind of just getting as much experience as I could. And if that meant taking kind of 10 steps back, I kind of accepted that I had to start again from the ground up with my experience, because you can't just, I don't know if any of your parents or friends are PTs or have gyms, but you can't just open up one day and have loads of clients. You have to literally get the experience from the ground up, and that is literally being on the gym floor trying to get clients to sign up with you, which is what I was doing in Leeds. So after I'd kind of done all that, I'd gone away to New York with Sweaty Betty, who I was working with, and I'd come back on this high, and I was like, I really want this job that they're offering. And it was an area manager role, and I was doing all my PTing, and I was like, I do want to open a gym, but I also want the safety of this employment from Sweaty Betty. And I applied for this role, and they basically told me that I wasn't experienced enough, and I'd have to move to London if I ever wanted to progress in that company. And I'm a Leeds girl, and I was like, I'm not moving to London. So I was like, I'm sorry, I'm staying. So instead, I quit again, and I didn't just quit straight away, by the way. I started looking for fitness units in the area. And when I found one, which is the one that was just shown on the screen then, over in Roundhay, I handed my notice in after kind of the process of starting to get the building, taking the lease, getting planning permission, etc. So that kind of got the ball rolling with that. And it was a big leap. And then it just so happened, as I quit my job and I started building work on the building in Roundhay, it was March 2020, I was ready to open. Obviously, that didn't happen. So that kind of threw another spanner in the works, and I felt like another setback. And again, I was unemployed. I guess I was doing my PT stuff, but I basically went into COVID with no job, like I know a lot of people in the country. But I felt, again, a little bit ashamed of what I'd done. I was like, if I'd have stayed in my job role, maybe I'd still be employed now, and I could be working from home at least. Anyway, I don't regret any of that, by the way, but I'm just trying to paint the picture that it's not an easy ride. So I guess my key takeaways to start with are not being afraid of change and going against what people expect of you. And I think I held on my shoulders such a heavy weight of what people expected me to do and wanted me to do rather than what I wanted to do. From being quite a young girl, I think I'd always known I wanted a business. So when I was at school, I remember, like, from being about 12, I wanted a business. My dad had a business, and I just thought it was the most amazing thing, and that's all I wanted to do when I left school. But kind of went to uni, like I said, and you follow the path of what everyone else is doing. So I think I always knew I wanted a business, but I didn't know what it was in. So I think it's just make sure you stay firm and trust your gut. And if your gut says something isn't right, like it did for me in that job, make sure that you kind of don't stay in it for the sake of it. And I appreciate there's a lot of pressure from your parents as well. I was lucky I didn't have a lot of pressure in that way, but I appreciate it is something that can come into play. So just be aware that there are other options. So I think as well, if you are thinking about going into business or entrepreneurship in particular, make sure you go into something that, I know you hear this all the time, especially if you're studying business, find something with a gap in the market or a USP, so a unique selling point. And the reason being, everybody in COVID, you probably noticed, started setting up these businesses on the side because people were bored. But the problem with doing that was you came out of COVID and everyone kind of returned back to old jobs, didn't they? But it's all good wanting to set up a business. However, you need to make sure that everyone else loves it too. So you can pitch it to your parents or you can pitch it to your friends and they're all going to say, oh, it's amazing, like my mum always has. But you need to make sure that it's genuinely got a USP and you can sell it, if that makes sense. So I was trying to sell my idea, which was small group fitness. And a lot of people, including my landlord of Roundhay, who wasn't so keen on giving me the building, by the way, she said to me, but there's loads of gyms in Leeds. Why do you know, there's Pure Gym, there's David Lloyd, there's Snap Fitness, there's all these gyms. Why do you want to set one up on Street Lane? You're just basically entering the saturated market. And I had to sell the story to her before I could even sell it to my clients because I needed her to let me sign the lease. But I had to explain to her that it wasn't just a normal gym. This was going to be something different. And I'd been down to London, I'd been to America, and I'd seen all these cool gyms, which some of you might have heard of. So like Barry's Boot Camp, Soul Cycle, One Rebel. And I was like, why does Leeds not have something like this? Because I was my own customer, and I think that's another way of seeing it. Like, you need to be purely passionate about it and make sure, can you see yourself as being that customer? Are people willing to pay for it, if that makes sense? And I think at first, like I said, people were kind of questioning me on it, and then they all start coming, they're like, oh, I see what you mean. So making sure there is a genuine gap in the market and not just something you want to kind of pursue that's saturated, and making sure that it's genuinely different. And for us, our USP was always we deliver a really personal and inclusive service, but it's also good fun. So hopefully your parents, if any of them have been, will say it is good fun. It's a bit crazy. There's good music, and it's just a little bit different. So it's not your typical mundane cycle class that you go to. And you know, a lot of people dread going to the gym. I think people hopefully look forward to coming here, so because it's a little bit more of a community, and we have a bit of a laugh, and people get to talk as well, so it's not just your boring exercise classes. Another thing that's kind of happened between leaving Sweaty Betty and starting my gym and now is I've scaled a lot. So I kind of just started in Leeds in Roundhay with, there's probably like 5 or 6 of us. There's now just over 20. And it was, you know, with this really small little hub that I think we had about 20 classes a week on, and I think you just saw on that slide before, we've got over 100 now, but I've scaled it, and the way I've scaled it is a number of things. There's a lot of risk involved, but a good team and having good people around you and making sure you look after your team as well. So I've not been able to do any of this without any of my team, because obviously I can only be in so many places at once, especially with 2 sites. So running X amount of classes a week, I've had to delegate quite a lot, which is hard when you're setting up a business because you really have to trust people to kind of hand over the reins. I'm really lucky that my mum is a big part of the Leeds studio, so she's been brilliant at letting me kind of go over to Harrogate more, and I know it's in her safe hands when she's there. She doesn't teach the classes, but she does all the reception and front of house stuff, which again is really important. And I think having a friendly face and your customer service for us has been key, because when there is so much competition, like my landlord said, and the economy's not great at the moment, as we're all aware, people can go spend their money elsewhere. So it's really important to make sure you're providing value for money, and you're showing people, if I can spend money at X, Y, Z, why should I spend it with you? So it's really important to nail that customer service. Another thing, which I just want to hammer home about, so don't set up a business to make quick money, because I promise you won't. And I always say this to people who, like young people especially, that want to set up in business. If you make a load of money in your first year, you're either doing something illegal or you've really got onto something and you've probably invented something. So the first couple of years are really tough financially, and it's taken my business the best part of 3 years to make a healthy profit, and that's not something I'm ashamed to say. It's been very up and down, especially with the economy, COVID, cost of living. Like last year, electricity goes through the roof, which is kind of in control again now, but you've got to be aware that you've got to play the long game in business. So if you want to make money fast, go work for someone and then, you know, save and go do it. Don't just think I'm going to quit my job and go make a load of money, because I promise you, I was skinter than a lot of my friends that went into grad jobs for a long time. So, and I still am, by the way, but what I'm saying is it takes a long time to actually make money. And like I just said about that £300,000 sales in the last year, it might sound like a lot of money, it might not sound like a lot of money to a lot of you, but the point of that is almost 300 grand went out last year because of developing the business, if that makes sense. So it sounds good until you see what goes out, if that makes sense. So just be aware, it might sound pretty and it might look pretty, but a lot goes on. There's been a lot of tears, a lot of sweat, hopefully in the gym, but there's been a lot of sweat and tears over the last few years, so don't go into it to make quick money. And then, of course, a bit more about challenges and benefits of owning a business, which I feel like I've touched on. So I promise you it's not all bad. There is some amazing things. So, for example, doing what I get to do, I've got to come in to see you guys today. I get to go away this afternoon for a few days, which I'm really looking forward to. So I do get the freedom in that respect. Don't get me wrong, my laptop will come away with me this weekend, so it kind of never stops, does the work. However, that there are amazing benefits, and I feel so much more fulfilled in what I would do now than I did, I think it was like 7 years ago when I started that grad job. So I was 3 years out of school, I started that grad job, and the fulfillment now versus then is like a different level. So I love what I do, and for the first few years, like I said, I wasn't earning money like my friends were in their grad jobs. However, the fulfillment was probably a lot different to how they were. They were in quite high-pressure jobs in London, which I was speaking to a couple of my friends from GSAL this morning who are both in London, and they're in big high-pressure jobs, which is amazing, and they are really happy. But for me, I know I couldn't have gone down that route. So just, I think, go with your gut with what fulfills you, whether that's setting up a business or going into a grad job. There's some amazing graduate jobs out there, by the way, so I'm not pushing people away from that life. I've got some friends that do some great things and get to go travel the world. Like my friend who was at GSAL, she got to go to LA last week she works for TikTok, which is like, it's a very high pressure job. I know TikTok's all good fun, but she actually is under a lot of pressure. But she got to go to LA last week, and she's in an amazing job after uni. So there are some great opportunities out there. Another challenge of setting up a business, which again, a lot of you probably already thought about, is the cost of setting it up. So everything will always cost more than you probably originally thought, especially for me. I think I'd had this budget in mind, and then there's always something extra to pay for, whether that's your business rates, more equipment, and then setting up Harrogate, for example, last year. I pitched to I bank with Virgin Money, and I had to pitch to them in the middle of like an economic crisis, asking them for quite a lot of money to set up this gym, and they were like, why are you doing that? So I think it is about taking calculated risks, but also, knowing the costs of these things. And with Virgin Money in particular, I had to kind of explain to them how I was going to make money in the middle of an economic crisis, because obviously cost of living was quite heightened. It was January last year it was December, the year before, when I was asking for this money. And I did get it, which was an amazing feeling, because I'd proven to them that I could make the money and I could kind of pay them back, which is great. But, getting the initial capital is a bit of a challenge. And don't get me wrong, networking is great. If you know people, it's a great way to kind of find the sources. But personally, I didn't have a choice. I had to go to my bank, who was literally trying to charge X amount of interest rate at the time, which is another story. But it's things like that. I've got that's an ongoing cost till September to pay that off. So just knowing the costs and benefits of what you're going into, and making sure that you're okay, and you can personally sit with being okay with the risks you're kind of taking. So, and also with that in particular, I don't know if my mum actually knows this, but I had to PG my house to get that loan. So that means like a personal guarantee. So there is a lot of risk involved. I don't know if you knew that, but sorry. I'm literally risking my home to set up this business. I don't think I told anyone at the time. But yeah, there is a lot of risk involved. So just make sure you are personally okay with kind of sitting on that risk, and just know that it is not my mum's home, by the way. That's my home. I didn't risk her home. It's my own house. So yeah, just making sure that you can kind of cope with the stresses that come with it. And I've missed a lot of social events over the last few years as well, because work has had to come first, because you're literally responsible for people's livelihoods as well as my own. So I've missed, people's birthdays, and I'm very lucky. I'm surrounded by great friends. A lot of them still that went to GSAL, and they know that work comes first, but there is a lot of personal sacrifice. So it's an amazing thing to do, and I don't regret it, because I genuinely could not work for someone again. But just be aware of what you're going into, and make sure you're taking calculated risks. Don't just quit your job and set up, if that makes sense. Ready for questions? Amazing.
Who was your favourite teacher at GSAL?
Who was my favourite teacher at GSAL? I don't know if she's in the room, but I loved Mrs. Gertchen at A-level economics. Is she in here? Okay, she's not in here. I'll change my mind. I was going to say I thought she was here. Oh, Mr. Veach. Mr. Veach. He was my head of year in year 10 and 11. And Mrs. Fitzsimons, but I don't know if she's Mrs. Fitzsimons anymore. Mrs. Weaver, she helped. I couldn't have got A through A-level maths without her. Oh, that was a disastrous time in my life. So, how would you make a profit in the first 2 years? Is what you're asking, isn't it? Yeah. So, I guess for me, my cash flow was strong, hence why I didn't go bankrupt, and kind of kept the cash flow in the business, and I was really careful with spending. But I mean, I guess the really obvious answer is keep your costs lower than your revenue. So get some big revenue in there. The problem was my revenues weren't as big as my costs.
Hi. Is there anything that you wish that you did in your business career, like looking back? Any like advice that you give, like one tip?
Any tips or advice I would give
Just
in my
like
business
one
career? Maybe spend less on my first building, so on my first studio. You learn from that though, because then the second time I did it, we did spend less, if that makes sense, because I knew where we'd kind of spent too much, if that makes sense. So I guess just being a little bit more careful in the initial setting up of the business, and maybe like not being as bothered what people think as well. How did I keep my business working through the lockdown? So we did online classes, so all my staff were doing all the Zoom stuff. And then on a weekend, because this was the only thing we were allowed to do, we sell coffees and smoothies. So we'd literally just open up on a weekend. And to be fair, that was more, we didn't really make a lot of money through that, but that was more to keep me sane and get me into work, because I hated being at home and doing stuff on Zoom. So just the online classes and trying to keep the community alive. But it wasn't a big money driver, to be honest with you. It was a really difficult time for the business.
What was the biggest challenge you faced from moving in a stable job in accountancy to starting your own business?
Well, the biggest challenge from moving from a stable job to my business was the money. I didn't have any income when I left, because the initial few months of setting up the business was doing all the building work, which I'd got the loan for, which was fine, but obviously I had nothing coming into my bank account. I was doing bits of personal training, but it didn't really bring a lot of money in. And then probably, again, going back to kind of watching all my friends in these amazing jobs, earning money, and me being like, what am I doing? If that makes sense. So probably looking around me and thinking, have I made the right decision?
What's like the basic idea of like making a good pitch?
Oh, the basic idea of making a good pitch, that's a good question. So I think we did this quite a lot in the Apprentice, which you actually haven't seen me do yet. They've seemed to crop that bit out, and I swear it's not because I messed up. I was actually quite good. But it's making sure you speak in a concise way and have all your sections together. So within a pitch, if you're pitching for a business idea, you know, saying what your product is, telling a story with it, making sure that the audience can have a connection with it and you're not just trying to sell another business. So really connecting them with it and explaining, again, what your USP is, why it's different to anything else on the market. And then speaking about the finances. So make sure your finances, if you ever watch Dragon's Den, you know the ones that are really good with their finances often get the investment. So being really clear with what your figures are. And especially when you get the questions about the figures at the end, having like your profit margin, your profit, your revenue, your costs, all in your head, ready to address when you're asked. So I think just being concise and being yourself and being calm. Like for me today, I'd rather speak without any paper. I know some people prefer to have it, but for me, I personally just speak better when I'm kind of just going with it, going with the flow rather than reading off a piece of paper. And I think that almost looks better than someone that's constantly like this, if that makes sense. So looking up and kind of making eye contact with people as well.
One more question.
What's the ultimate end goal? Do you want to sell it or like expand more? Like what's the aim?
So the end goal is definitely to sell it, and I'm not quite about that at all, but that's definitely like 10 years away. So I think the next 3 to 5 years, hence kind of why I went on The Apprentice as well, is to continue to expand it and maybe open a couple more. Especially we've just launched something called Reformer Pilates at Leeds and Harrogate on quite a small scale, and I want to launch that on a bigger scale, but I need another unit and a little bit more money for that. So definitely continue to grow the business at the moment.